to expand a different kind of response to people in crisis.
I'm looking to see it everywhere in Canada.
The new plan to get more mobile crisis workers in Toronto, why advocates say it could save lives.
It was very disappointing, it was very hurtful, and I felt betrayed as an NDP voter and supporter.
Plus, the backlash to the booting, how the NDP is trying to defend itself after kicking a member from caucus over comments about the Israel-Hamas war.
One died literally in the oil spill.
Plus, cleanup continues. 2 months after a fire spilled toxic chemicals into Mimo Creek, we return to assess the damage and the wildlife destroyed. Hi there, I'm Chris Glover. We're beginning tonight with a plan to expand a relatively new way Toronto has been responding to people in crisis. Instead of sending police, in some instances, a team made up of mobile crisis workers is deployed. The mental health-focused program is now in its second year of a 3-year pilot project, and it could be set to see an expansion. Tyler Cheese has our top story tonight.
Instead of a police response to a crisis call, community agencies like Gerstein Crisis Center have been sending mobile health workers. And now, city staff are set to recommend an expansion of the Toronto Community Crisis Service.
We are really encouraged and highly supportive of the city's plan to expand the TCCS project citywide.
The project was introduced in early 2022 in response to several deaths of people in crisis involving a police interaction. A city report says in its first year, the program dealt with around 7,000 calls. 78% of them transferred from 911, successfully resolved without police involvement.
We've really seen how effective that a response that's really centered in community is when meeting the needs of folks who are having a mental health crisis in the community.
It is the worst event happened to me in my life.
In November of last year, Maj Darwich's son Abdullah left his Mississauga home wearing only a pair of shorts. The now 20-year-old has autism and is nonverbal. Minutes later, Darwich found his son a few houses away, surrounded by police.
I found my son laying down on the floor and with his hand, he was handcuffed to the back. And then when I looked to his face, it was full with blood.
Darwich says Abdullah was tasered 3 times and almost a year later still hasn't recovered from the trauma.
Well, after the incident, this is what happened to him. I don't know when he will get rid of this effects.
Though Darwich lives in Peel, he's hopeful more crisis response teams across the region will prevent harmful police interactions.
I'm looking to see it everywhere in Canada, because you know our vulnerable people in our community, they have the right to live peacefully.
Crisis response workers say there's no reason for these types of calls to start with police.
We want something that's trauma-informed, that's harm reduction informed, and that we're responding to a health need with a health response instead of a justice response.
The expansion proposal will be considered by Toronto's Executive Committee next week before being presented to City Council on November 8th. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
New tonight, candidates vying to be the next leader of the Ontario Liberal Party squared off in a debate in Toronto. Among the topics discussed was the cost of living crisis and the lack of affordable housing.
When dollars come into our province in housing, it has to be to build housing and add supply.
We need to incentivize the buildings of more purpose-built rentals, and that can mean providing rebates on their development charge dollars or on PST.
We will bring rent control back so that there's meaningful affordability and savings for hardworking Ontarians.
We've got to go and talk to landlords and say, listen, when you built this building after 2018, you expected a certain rent in the future of this building. It's much higher than that. Let's put in some rent controls.
Leadership candidates will face off in 2 more debates, one in Ottawa and one in Brampton. Party members will cast ranked ballots at the end of November, with the winner to be announced on December 2nd. In city politics, a new plan was unveiled today to try to deal with the ongoing housing affordability crisis. Toronto wants to build 65,000 affordable housing units over the next 7 years. But the big plan needs some big-time help. City Hall reporter Sean Jeffords explains what's needed.
This is a roadmap. It is a generational change that will shift how the city delivers housing and what kind of housing we prioritize.
Olivia Chow outlining her plan to accelerate the construction of affordable housing in Toronto. It promises to build 65,000 units over the next 7 years. But Chow needs over $31 billion from the province and federal government to do it.
In the past decade, City of Toronto have not been building the kind of housing people of Toronto need. We need a fundamentally transformational approach.
The plan calls for the city to act as a public builder, developing the housing in cooperation with nonprofits. This was a key campaign promise for Chow, who says private developers simply haven't built enough affordable housing.
We are reversing the destructive thinking that of over the past 2 decades. And this thinking is that only private sector can build housing, and that the municipal or federal, provincial government cannot do so.
And encouraging all orders of government.
Toronto Deputy City Manager Jag Sharma says the plan is ambitious. But if the city fails to act now, building the homes later will be more expensive.
We cannot afford to not act, and we urge the other levels of government to join us.
There are some very ambitious numbers.
Councillor and former mayoral candidate Brad Bradford is critical of the mayor's plan. He doesn't think the city has the in-house expertise to be a public builder.
There is certainly no shortage of both not-for-profit and private sector developers here in this city that know how to build housing. But if you go through that 40-page document, the private sector is not mentioned one single time, which is really remarkable because to my mind, it's like trying to build yourself out of the housing crisis with both hands tied behind your back.
So it's a really comprehensive, broad plan.
This planning professor says the goal is ambitious, but the city is asking a lot of the provincial and federal governments.
The hitch is, how do we pay for this? And importantly, this is billions of dollars just for the City of Toronto's plan. And the provincial government represents all of the province of Ontario. The federal government represents all of Canada. So how much are they going to be willing to invest just in this city?
The plan will come to the city's executive committee for debate next week. It must ultimately be approved by City Council. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to devastating news coming out of Sault Ste. Marie. The northern Ontario city is in mourning after shootings left 5 people dead last night. Police say they first discovered the body of a 41-year-old after responding to a break-and-enter at a home. Then they found the bodies of 3 children aged 6, 7, and 12. Police say they'd been shot dead at a second home. A 45-year-old at that second residence was found injured with a gunshot wound. Officers say the suspected shooter was also found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Police have confirmed that the adults and children were known to each other, calling it a tragic case of intimate partner violence. They say there's no ongoing risk to public safety. To St. Catharines now, where Ontario's police watchdog is investigating after an officer in Niagara region shot and killed a man last night. Dale Manukduk has the latest from the scene.
It happened at this home behind me on Melody Trail near Lakeshore Road and Niagara Street in St. Catharines. Police say that around 9 o'clock last night, officers were responding to calls about a man with a knife. The Special Investigations Unit says officers were at the front door of the home when a man approached them with a knife, and due to that interaction, 2 officers shot a 48-year-old man. Niagara police say that the fire department and paramedics did come to the scene to try and save his life before he was pronounced deceased.
It's a little scary because this neighborhood is usually very quiet. We don't have that kind of thing going on here. In my lifetime, I've never seen it.
We frequent this restaurant all the time. We come to this beach all the time. I never feel unsafe, so that is very shocking.
Multiple neighbors tell CBC Toronto that they heard about 6 to 8 gunshots. They also say that the man who was killed lives at this home with his parents who stayed at a hotel last night. Our cameras did catch them arriving back home this afternoon in a taxi. They seemed visibly shaken. Now, because Niagara officers were involved in this shooting, the province's police watchdog invoked its mandate. The SIU investigates police conduct when it results in death and injury or if an officer discharges their firearm. This is the second time this week the SIU has invoked its mandate. Yesterday in Caledon, police say an OPP officer was struck by a Jeep Wrangler and another officer fired at least 3 shots at the vehicle. The SIU is asking that anyone with information to either of those cases contact them. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, St. Catharines.
Looking outside live, and believe it or not, it's 17 degrees still, mostly clear this evening. And yup, it is still October. Colette Kennedy is joining us now. Hey, Colette, just stunning, unseasonable warmth here.
Thanks, Chris. Well, yes, of course, I can't take credit for the mild weather, but we can talk about how this month started off with temperatures way above seasonal, and now we're getting near the end. It's not going to last to the very end. I'm sorry for Halloween. It's not going to last till then, but still very mild. And again, when you consider where our normal highs are for this time of year, you know, Toronto up to 20 degrees today, nearly 10 degrees above normal, and Windsor, okay, how about it? 24, 22 for London and Sarnia, 21 Chatham, Kent, some incredible numbers there. We do have some of that cloud cover through the overnight, but the heavy rain, the organized stuff along the frontal boundary with a lot of lightning strikes as well, really pushing to the north through Sudbury and North Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, and through these regions. And it's just isolated stuff that we see filling in further south. So could we get a passing shower? Yes, we could, but more than likely we just get an isolated one and some cloud cover out of this. And you can see that too even into Wednesday evening, that risk into southwestern Ontario, but definitely not much to it, and definitely not organized, and definitely mild again, especially with the overnight temperatures, a low of 15. And in some cases, we've already reached that low and the temperature's actually climbing. Tomorrow, let's do it, Chris. Let's take it to a high, even with overcast conditions, 20 degrees, and the winds play into that. I'll talk more about that coming up.
All right, let's do it, and we'll talk to you again in just a few minutes, Colette. Toronto police tonight saying they're investigating 2 hate-motivated incidents involving mezuzahs. That's a scroll of parchment inscribed with a prayer affixed to doorposts of Jewish homes. Meanwhile, a prominent Jewish advocacy organization has released photos of what it calls anti-Semitic vandalism. These photos were released by the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, and the organization says it's received reports of the graffiti spotted across the city. Toronto police tell us they're aware of graffiti in multiple locations, and they are investigating. There has, of course, been a sharp increase in hate crime reports targeting Jewish and Palestinian communities since Hamas's attack on Israel earlier this month. Earlier this week, on Thursday, Toronto's police chief reported a 132% spike in hate crimes. Out of 14 reports, 12 were related to anti-Semitism. Now to the latest controversy swirling around the Ontario NDP. The party is divided tonight over a decision to expel MPP Sarah Jama from caucus. The leader kicked her out of the party yesterday amid fallout from comments made by Jama over the Israel-Hamas war. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has the details.
This was the message outside the NDP leader's constituency office, a day after Marit Stiles kicked MPP Sarah Jama out of caucus. Online, some longtime NDP supporters say they're done backing the party. The president of a riding association saying she resigned. A former NDP MPP is uncomfortable.
It's not an easy decision, but I'm with a lot of people who are worried about what to do with my ballot. The tools that I thought would be used to be able to build a better Ontario are actually being used to hurt people who are standing up for that same vision.
Some feel the party abandoned Jama, who's married to a Palestinian and was an activist before entering politics.
It was very disappointing. It was very hurtful. And I felt betrayed as an NDP voter and supporter.
Stiles says it was a tough decision about being part of a team. A source within the NDP tells CBC Toronto that Jama swapped out the statement she read in the House at the last minute. A source close to Jama says the party wanted her to say things she hadn't agreed with, so she changed it.
This has nothing to do with her position on Palestine or Israel. We can't have MPPs essentially acting completely independent of our caucus and undermining the work we do.
Standing with the party leader, MPP Dolly Begum seemed to be speaking to those ready to leave the party over this issue.
The NDP is the only party in North America that's actually calling for a ceasefire right now. That's calling for peace. That's calling for the support that Palestinians need.
Despite the reaction online, a longtime NDP strategist believes most party members agree with the decision to cut ties with JAMA.
What we saw in the House was Ms. JAMA breaking ranks.
She says this type of rift isn't uncommon in politics.
I was around for the New Democrat government in the Ray years. I can tell you full well the social contract years had a lot more internal fights.
Now a party trying to gain more supporters and challenge Doug Ford in the next election is also trying to win back its usual party faithful. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Hey, remember the devastating effect of the fire at that chemical plant in Etobicoke? We covered it for weeks back in August. Conservationists racing to contain the toxic sludge that spilled into the Mimico Creek. Well, it's now been 2.5 months since then, and we're getting a clear picture of the impact along the waterway. Ali Chiasson went back to the creek to assess the damage.
We're in front of the remaining family. This started in the summer as a family of 8. We are looking at the father swan, the cob. He's the only parent remaining. There are only 3 cygnets remaining. One died literally in the oil spill.
The chemical plant that caught fire in August is about 12 kilometers upstream from where we are at Humber Bay. The petroleum slick that seeped into Mimico Creek is no longer visible on the surface. The berms are still here to contain any remnants, while the ducks and swans dawdle around them. These days, environment advocates are more concerned about what's below the surface, the vegetation, the food the wildlife rely on.
I would say we have more questions than answers. Do need more transparency around what is in there, how clean it has become, and what the ongoing steps will be.
The Ontario Ministry of the Environment says they are on track to finish the cleanup by the end of this month, and they're transitioning their response to the restoration phase.
Restoration refers to returning the creek to the conditions where it was prior to the spill.
This environmental science professor says nature will do a lot of that work for us.
Fortunately, petroleum products are biodegradable, and there are lots of bugs in the environment that do degrade petroleum.
Bugs as in microbes, bacteria that will continue to break down what's left over. For better or for worse, those bugs have a lot of practice.
Just because it's so highly urbanized. Mimico Creek receives runoff from the airport, it receives runoff from all sorts of streets, and so far from pristine. Any urban creek like Mimico Creek, Etobicoke Creek, Humber River, they're all highly impacted.
Wildlife advocates like Kelly Duffin hope that after the spill, more people advocate for better urban waterways and to create healthier environments for the wildlife that lives here.
How can, in a similar disaster, hoping it doesn't happen, but knowing that it could, what can we do better next time and collectively? Hey, boo-boo. You're such a good man.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
You're doing a very...
Taking you now to Centennial College and an event today meant to inspire young women to pursue careers in the skilled trades.
Finding myself here, like talking to all these people, making new acquaintances and talking to people who have been in the trades, especially other women, is such a big deal to me.
The Jill of All Trades event took place at Centennial's Ashtonby campus in Scarborough. The event welcomed over 100 female students from school boards across the GTA, giving students the chance to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty with several tasks. It also features women in leadership positions in their field who spoke to the students about their experiences. Tonight, over to you, Colette. And unbelievably warm days for the end of October, but probably not records, hey?
Yeah, well, the thing about that, Chris, is for Toronto anyway, the records are kind of in the mid-20s. So although we'll flirt with them, we don't have much of a chance till perhaps Friday. And Friday would be the day as well for, say, Windsor, a chance to hit a record then, because although they're in the upper 20s there at this time of year, the record dips a little bit as we get towards the end of the week. So we'll keep an eye on things. Today's high, yes, we did it at 20 degrees, that low. And then look look at the normal temperature, so a normal high is 11. We're going to hit that 20 again tomorrow. So we're almost 10 degrees above seasonal, but we're more than 10 degrees above seasonal with the overnight lows. So really mild overnights as well. And tonight it has to do with the southerly flow of the winds. It also has to do with the cloud cover. It's like a little blanket of insulation, keeps in some of the heat from today. We do have the main line of heavier rain, more organized stuff, some active weather, lightning strikes, all well to the north of the GTA and well to the north of southwestern Ontario, but a few isolated showers can fill in at times. So tomorrow I'd be prepared for that, but not really looking at things too organized or very heavy in nature. Certainly we do have extra cloud cover through the day on Wednesday and very breezy conditions tonight and especially early tomorrow for southwestern Ontario, but we'll find those winds pushing through the GTA and picking up. Thursday, there'll be a band that goes through kind of late morning and then into early afternoon. And then we should see some sunny breaks developing. So it's not a write-off all day on Thursday with the wet weather. Rainfall amounts, at least south of Sudbury and North Bay, tend to be much lighter in nature. What aren't light, though, are those winds. So at times really driving in here, some of the gusts exceeding certainly 50 kilometers an hour. And it's that direction that's so important coming in from the southwest with that very, very mild air. So like I said, in some cases, overnight temperatures, the lows have already been met or you're at them, and then it'll be climbing towards morning. 20 tomorrow, 21, 22, a chance of getting close to the record, at least on Friday. And then what goes up, Chris, must come down, and that happens towards next weekend.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Colette. And that's it for our TV broadcast tonight. Here's a look inside our radio control room, where the other half of the operation here at CBC Toronto happens. Join me and Colette on CBC Radio's Here and Now all week in the afternoon from 3 to 6. And I'll be back with you tomorrow night at 11 right here on CBC Television. We'll see you then.